Much, Matt. Yes, hello, good morning everybody. Let's look forward now to the British Grand Prix weekend. It might be wet and miserable at Silverstone, but hopefully we'll be in for some great action once we get onto the track a little bit later on this morning. The track is due to open in just a few minutes' time, but John, of course, this track is used extensively for testing, so will they bother to go out with a track like this?
Well, I think first of all the teams will go out. They want to go out and just do a reconnaissance lap to see what the circuit's like. There hasn't been an awful lot of wet running. I think San Marino Grand Prix was the last time the teams ran in anger on a wet track at a Grand Prix weekend. Of course, they do get the opportunity to test on wet days, and in fact, on occasions, both tyre companies will wet a dry circuit to keep that programme of development of wet weather tyres on sign with the competition. Whether teams want to go out and spend very much time, well, that's another question. But the weather forecast for this weekend is changeable. Probably better on Saturday with the chance of showers on Sunday. If that is the case, then teams will be forced out to get information. And of course, as we know in the wet, every lap is different. And that's one of the problems of finding out about wet weather setups, tyre choices. And in fact, I think Bridgestone alone have brought 3 different grades of wet weather tyre here this weekend. So quite a lot of work for the teams to do. And I would expect to see pretty much everybody going out pretty much after the 11 o'clock watershed.
Well, let's hope that we do see the cars out on track for the thousands of fans that have turned up here on Friday to watch the free practice. That's what they want, to see and hear Formula One cars in action in the UK, and that's the opportunity. And it certainly looks as though many people are getting ready to come out on track. Eddie Irvine climbing aboard the revised Jaguar. And of course, this is the first time that we will see the modifications that mainly centre around the front of the car, the nose section and the front aerodynamics, the barge boards around the side there. That is where all the changes have really been made so far, and they're hoping that the new modifications will of course improve the pace of this machine.
Well, the testing that they did down in Spain last week, I think probably was more inconclusive than it was anything else. Eddie Irvine spent a day testing the car, didn't get that many laps. Then Mark Webber was parachuted in to give the Jaguar team an opportunity to look at another young driver. Pedro de la Rosa did his share for Jaguar as well. They reckon that there is a difference in feel. In terms of times, they thought they had gained a second in relation to other teams, but it's so difficult in testing to tell whether your time is a real time, because people in testing don't always show their hand. It all depends on the amount of fuel you've got on board, and I think that we really will only find out after qualifying here this weekend if the Milton Keynes-based Jaguar team have made real progress.
Also modifications for the Renault team this weekend. They're running revised aerodynamics, which they haven't really had a chance to test on track as yet, but the simulations, the wind tunnel work has certainly shown that they'll be a benefit to them, so they've applied them for this weekend. We'll see whether that helps Renault. They're looking fairly confident, actually, the Renault team this weekend, John. They say that the car should suit the track well.
They've got a very good car, and the aerodynamic work that they've done throughout the year has been pretty much something the team are happy with, and that's why they're confident to bring aerodynamic changes that they've only actually tested in the wind tunnel. Now, Williams have done the same thing. They've also brought along new bodywork changes to the aerodynamics, only wind tunnel tested. But you know, the confidence that teams have today in the way that wind tunnels can replicate what they get on the racetrack is of such a level that 2 teams are prepared to take that opportunity to bring untested on the racetrack aerodynamic body changes and feel confident enough to see these will be better.
So cars are indeed making their way down the pit lane. We're just a few seconds away now from the green light coming on there. There we go, the exit is open and the British Grand Prix weekend gets underway, and you can watch all the coverage of every single Formula One session here on Sky Digital Plus. So we are looking forward to the whole weekend's action here. Cars coming out onto the track, and the Minardis of Mark Webber coming out, Eddie Irvine, Felipe Massa coming out, and the Saubers also there coming out. The temperature, as you can see, only 14 degrees Celsius. Track temperature the same as the air temperature at the moment, and you can see immediately the plume of spray that comes up from the cars as they go out onto the track and heading through the Beckett section down the Hangar Straight and towards the Stowe corner. In the Arrows pit there is no action at the moment, but we will wait to see whether they come out onto track at all today, or whether they will be sitting it out here this afternoon and throughout. So we shall wait and see what happens. Now, Peter, I think you've got some information for us.
Yes, good morning, Ben. Yes, I was just adding to what John was saying about that new bodywork on the Williams. Much neater, tidier, slimmer side pods in front of the rear wing there. Looks as if they're trying to improve airflow to the rear wing, Ferrari style. But they've only got 2 sets of that, as John was saying, straight from the wind tunnel to Silverstone, and it's fitted to the 2 race cars. So, of course, if either driver goes off, and let's hope they don't, and damages that bodywork, that's it for the weekend. So, trying to stay on the island today for sure.
Peter, is the rain actually falling hard down there where you are at the moment?
Where I am actually at the moment in the paddock area, it's not raining at all. There's a little bit of sun trying to break through, but it's very wet underfoot, of course, and I would say it's intermediate tyre conditions right now. Great, okay, thanks Peter. We're looking on track now, and some great views once again from inside the suspension. We can really see the Formula 1 cars at work. A lot of spray being thrown out, but it's good news that the rain has actually stopped falling, so the track might begin to dry out. Temperatures, as we say, 14 degrees, so it'll take a little while with a lot of rain on track from the overnight rain.
Indeed. What you want is the sun to come out and really the ambient temperature to rise. It's about 14 Celsius. You want to get it into the middle 20s. That will help the drying process. But what also will help the drying process is if every one of the 22 cars, it may only be 20 this morning, bearing in mind the position with arrows, but hopefully they will be out as well. Get everybody out on track, then a drying line will begin to appear, and once that happens, then it'll not be very long before people do swap from either their full wet tyres or the intermediate tyre, which some people may choose to run. Just depends on the amount of water that might be standing in certain parts of the circuit, particularly maybe coming into the chicane. So get out, get the track a drying line as quickly as possible, and then we can begin to see what we can expect in Saturday qualifying. And I'm looking forward to seeing below 1 minute 20 seconds in qualifying. In fact, I'm predicting I'll take another chance and go as low as a 1 minute 18 something for pole position, assuming that track conditions are dry and perfect.
David Coulthard makes his way down the pit lane. We saw Jenson Button completing his installation lap and now returning to the Renault garage to check that everything is okay. 25 years since Renault made their Grand Prix debut at this particular track. In 1977, the RS01 was the first Renault Formula 1 car, and of course nowadays they are involved in the whole process, the chassis building and the engine building, as they were then, John, 25 years ago. Of course, the early days of the turbocharged Renault saw an awful lot of non-finishes before they made progress.
Well, Ben, I remember the day that the car ran here at Silverstone, Jean-Pierre Jabouille, and that single turbo V6 1.5 litre engine Renault Formula 1 car, and I think the Formula 1 paddock laughed at Renault and said, these guys are mad. There's no way that engine can either be reliable or powerful enough, or both, to beat a 3 litre Cosworth Ferrari Alfa Romeo or whatever that engine, Matra engine that was running at that time. Well, that was one that was a slap in the face for the Formula 1 cognoscenti, because of course turbocharged cars went on to dominate Formula 1 really from the early 80s up until they were banned at the end of 1988.
Well, we're riding on board with David Coulthard at the moment. Number of cars on track. A little bit behind him is Olivier Panis in the BAR. You're looking at Mario Ilian and Mario Tyson, competitors when it comes to engine builders. Mercedes versus BMW. We're talking of Panis, who's out on track at the moment. His team boss, David Richards, the team based just down the road. Peter Windsor caught up with David a little earlier.
David, good morning. Well, sort of good morning anyway. What do you think about the weather?
Well, it's typical English summer weather, isn't it? We had a barbecue last night for a load of French journalists, and we sat there with our jackets on, and eventually had to go inside about 8:30. So, no, a bit unfortunate, but I think the weather forecast for the weekend, from what I understand, is getting marginally better.
A lot of people in the pit lane saying, should be a good weekend for Bridgestone if the weather continues. So at least we can look positive on that side.
Yeah, very much looking forward to the rain, actually.
How are things going with the chassis, the engine? What have we got here this weekend?
Just small steps forward all the time. There isn't a weekend that goes by without us doing some small improvement, but, we are faced with what we started the year with fundamentally.
The quicker of the two wet weather drivers in your team, Olivier or Jacques, do you think?
Well, I don't know, because if we do have a wet race or wet qualifying, it'll be the first one we've had this year, won't it? So I look forward to finding out.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
All right, cheers.
So David Richards, boss of BAR, of course, they're based about 8 miles away only in Brackley, and not very far at all. About 360 people working on the Formula One project down there. Of course, they did lose some people this year. That's been a bit standard throughout some of the teams so far this season. But it will be an opportunity for many of the team members, not only from BAR, from Jordan, and the many other British teams, to attend a Grand Prix for the only time this season.
Yes, a very busy period, a very busy Grand Prix, and in fact it was the pre-Grand Prix test, which came in early June, that many of the teams use as a hospitality period. It allows their guests to get very much closer to the teams and maybe get to meet a racing driver. But also it is a massive corporate event. Silverstone, one of the largest corporate events in the UK in any given year. And during the Sunday Grand Prix itself, it is the busiest airport in the world. I don't know what it will be like this year, but certainly up to last year, there's something like 4,000 aircraft movements in and out throughout the day. And it is choreographed helicopters from dawn till dusk.
Well, there is Olivier Panis' teammate, Jacques Villeneuve, on track at the moment as well. We're taking a little replay here of Eddie Irvine in the revised Jaguar. What has he been up to? Let's take a look. Well, it also looks pretty sensible. Now, those new modifications that have been made to the Jaguar, of course, the man responsible for those, or largely, is John Russell at Jaguar, and Peter Windsor has caught up with him.
John, nice to see you at a race. Haven't seen you for a while. When was your last race?
I went to Monaco.
Had a look at all the other cars as well as the circuit.
Yeah, great unveiling, yeah.
Now, we've heard a lot about the new package on the Jaguar here. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how much testing has gone into it?
We tested at Barcelona last week, and I think the last day made some steady progress with it. It's fairly comprehensive. It's the first package to have come out of the wind tunnel, which we've now had for 3 months. I think we're really quite pleased with what we've done in that period of time.
Talking more downforce or less drag?
It's more downforce.
And did the drivers feel that when they went out at Barcelona?
Certainly, yeah.
Good. Well, you're being a little bit monosyllabic, but understandably so. It's early days in the weekends. Where do you think you're going to be this weekend if things go reasonably well?
I think it's difficult to predict because other people have had update kits here, so as ever, it's never a stationary target. We obviously need to show an improvement, and I think we've probably got the tool here to make an improvement. Where that'll send us, I don't know, honestly.
Well, we all hope that you've done so, and very best of luck. Thank you.
So do I. Okay.
Well, thanks to Peter for that interview with John Russell. But Ben, just, sometimes there are little things that take place, which John Russell, it's the question you ask and the response that you get. And the questions that John Russell was asked were the improvements. Yes, was the answer, yes. The reality was in that Jaguar test, and I think it's quite important to sort of communicate this, is that the barge boards, the front wing and the diffuser in themselves didn't make any specific difference in terms of performance. The key, apparently, and this is the information I'm getting back from my sources, is that there was a new rear suspension that was tested as well. And it was that new rear suspension and the way that it allows the air flow through that suspension that actually brought alive all the aerodynamic changes. So it's just an amazing small change to suspension made a huge difference to the aerodynamic changes that the team really were focusing upon.
Well, lots happening here this weekend, lots of changes to the cars, interesting guests as well. Eric Sykes, we saw just chatting away down there in pit lane. I'm sure we'll see lots of other interesting faces here this weekend. Felipe Massa, what's he going on about now? The Brazilians, of course, winners of the World Cup, and 5 times, yes, World Cup winners. Presumably that's what he's going on all about. Meanwhile, Peter Windsor is talking to Ross Brawn of Ferrari.
Can you update us on the wet testing you've been able to do with Bridgestone in the last 6 weeks or so?
The last was here actually when we had that test a few weeks ago in pretty dreadful conditions. So that's the last time we did any wet testing proper. We did some sessions before then, so not much has changed since then.
Now, we have a 7-tyre rule here. If it's wet for 3 days, is that any sort of encumbrance for you in terms of what you need to be able to do?
It is really, and it's under discussion because it's a little bit illogical that we have 10 sets of dry tyres and 7 sets of wet, because if it's wet all weekend, we're going to restrain. It's going to restrain the running because we don't want to run and use all the tyres up. So I think perhaps in the future there'll be The possibility of having 10 sets of wets, 3 sets available for Friday and then 7 sets for the rest of the weekend. So you will see people being a bit cautious today because the forecast is not so good for the weekend and we can't afford to use all our tyres up.
Feel and atmosphere in the team since that ruling in Paris last week?
It hasn't changed. I mean, we respect the ruling of the FIA and we're getting on with the job. We don't, nothing's really changed.
Okay, very best of luck this weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, of course, referring to the decision, the fine that was handed out to Ferrari, basically for what they did on the podium after the Austrian Grand Prix. Just looking at a replay of Mark Webber here, getting a little bit sideways on the exit of Abbey there, John, but it didn't seem to affect him too much.
And that's what you have to watch out for, because there are these little bits of standing water. Even though this surface at Silverstone is about as good as it gets, you still get little depressions, and of course if there's been heavy water it will gather in those depressions, so knowing where those standing water areas are is important. Now come need to do to ensure that that car doesn't wear out its rear Michelins the way we saw in the Nürburgring is going to be priority number one, no doubt, because that very soft compound that was taken to the Nürburgring contributed to that. But if you look at the rear tyres of the McLaren or of the Renault, both on Michelin, they didn't suffer that excessive wear that we saw from the Williams team. And Williams, as we have mentioned here, with aerodynamic changes to their car, hoping that somehow or other the combination of that with car setup and also this slightly harder tyre to suit the circuit conditions. This is a more aggressive circuit. It's also a high-speed circuit. Of course, the Nürburgring not quite as quick and more smooth surface, allowing for that softer compound. Here at Silverstone it's going to be more durable, two-stop race, so it's proportionately harder than the Nürburgring. It isn't rock hard, that is for sure.
Well, we've got a few cars on track, some 6 cars on track at the moment, but there is the winner of the Nürburgring. Talking of that track, Rubens Barrichello, after that great performance last time out in Germany, beating Michael Schumacher, bringing home another Ferrari 1-2, but only his second Grand Prix victory in his career. Fired up this year, no doubt, really enjoying the performance of this car. We'll see what he can do this time around. Of course, a damp qualifying session a couple of years ago, he took pole position. I wonder if he's going to be able to repeat that sort of performance this weekend. Now, I think we've got a chance to hear from Eddie Jordan.
The race up, it could be quite a good little weekend for you.
I don't think it will, and I hope for the spectators it won't either. You know, it's never fun racing in the wet. Anything can happen, sure. I mean, I think you're alluding to the fact that Jordan can win only in the wet.
No, not really. I think Takuma and Giancarlo are good in the wet. You seem to be on the right tyres from what people are saying.
Everything at the moment seems to be in a good condition to have a good result in the wet. Forecast for Sunday is for dry. If we could get a good qualifying position, I think that'll be a key to it, a lot of the situation.
But there's much more important business taking place tonight, I think. Tell us a bit about that.
I hope you're not talking about the manufacturers' meeting. Is there something later than that?
Something a little bit more interesting than that, I think.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, of course, but we have to be on our very best behaviour. I mean, what you're talking about is the Stereophonics are performing free for Click, which is a great charity of mine, and my own band in Stowe School. And it was something that they came to a number of Grand Prix, and I got them back. I said, OK, when we come to Silverstone, you have to repay the team in a little way, and that is, and to my absolute surprise, because they just did Glastonbury last weekend, and then they're in the middle of a big tour, and for them to come to Silverstone for the race fans here, it's been fantastic. And
well, Michael Schumacher here, obviously in big trouble, spinning out of Abbey Corner, John, and the engine stalled, which is unusual. Normally these anti-stall devices help, but let's take a look at the replay here.
Yes, this is the first part, the left-hand part of Abbey. This is, I call it a chicane. I mean, normally the traction control should kick in. Now the anti-stall device also should kick in, but you've got 5 seconds in which to get your hand onto the lever. Now, why that spin occurred, maybe something to do with why the engine didn't keep running. Now, I can't believe that was a driver error from Michael Schumacher. I suspect it may be some technical error on the car. Michael is the smartest kid in the block. He would normally have his hand on the clutch lever at the point he knew he was beyond recovery. Nothing did anything to help the engine stay running. He's out of this session. They've got 41 minutes. Let's watch the onboard. There's a puddle as he turns in. That's not a problem. Comes up out of the left hand, but turns into the right. All of a sudden, the back end breaks away. Now, his hand, you can see his left hand fiddling for the clutch lever, adjusting the steering wheel, trying to make the best out of the bad job. But there's no fire. The engine's already stalled.
Yeah, looks like it, John. Looks like it had died already on him. So, as you say, it does look like some sort of technical problem putting him out of this free practice session. And it does, remember, he's not allowed to use the spare car. This is a free practice session, and he cannot use the spare car until he switch car until he gets into qualifying. So he has to sit and watch or make his way back to the pits, whichever. And Ferrari's setup work will now concentrate on the car of Rubens Barrichello. So that could hurt Ferrari. Valuable setup time being lost. And it is funny, Michael Schumacher does seem to suffer bad luck here at Silverstone on many times in the past. There you can see the driver's feet just being dried off, Rubens Barrichello's feet just being, his shoes being dried off before he gets into the car. Damp shoes on racing car pedals, not a good idea, so they just get dried off before he gets in.
So Rubens is the man for Ferrari as Eddie Irvine continues the good work at Jaguar. I've been putting in all last week, going to Lommel, first of all in Belgium. That's the Ford Proving Ground, where they did some straight line aerodynamic testing, then down to Barcelona to continue that testing on track with other teams. And watching on board Jenson Button currently third quickest and fastest in that third sector, now beginning his second run of the morning. Tops climbing all the way up to Maggots.
Quick tweak on the seatbelts to make sure he's firmly ensconced, and then through this section, which in the dry produces some of the highest G loading from side to side experienced at any racetrack in the world. But of course in the wet it's a slightly different story, and it's a question of feeding the power on, using that traction control to its best effect. And we know the Renault does have a brilliant traction control system, and as we said, they're looking pretty confident for this race. They reckon the track layout here at Silverstone does suit this Renault with its very flat V10 engine, which hopefully provides an assistance with the handling and with the performance out of corners, the traction out of corners. And Jenson Button here working quite hard on the steering despite the traction control.
Yeah, coming through Club Corner, the difficulty of Club is if you take what I would consider to be the normal dry line, you sort of hug the curb all around the inside of the corner, but in the wet you tend to let the car run much wider, but of course then you're into an odd camber and the car wants to fall off the corner before you get to the exit. Now you just got a glimpse of Schumacher's car there and the exit of Bridge Corner now through Priory. Coming into Brooklands, there's a stream of water running across here. There you just get a glimpse of it out to the right of Jenson Button. Then there's the short straight into this long, never-ending Luffield corner again, staying way, way off the curbs, going the long way around Luffield, looking for a grip on the outside of the circuit, then flat out down across start-finish line. And Jenson Button stays, he goes second quickest.
Let's just listen. Down change into Copse in these conditions, and then back on the power. And if you want to continue to ride with Jenson Button, if you go to Sky button 6, that is our channel, and you can continue to ride with Jenson Button around the Silverstone circuit. Meanwhile, we'll take a look into the Williams pitch garage and a revised colour scheme on the car this weekend as Juan Pablo Montoya clambers aboard. So not only revised aerodynamics, but of course Hewlett-Packard is now represented on the car. They've taken over Compaq. It was Compaq on the car at the start of the season, but in a very rapid change around, they've changed all the team uniforms, they've changed the car liveries, the race transporters, and now they've got them out here at Silverstone this weekend.
Takuma Sato, who was doing a very good job on a very quick lap, gets it wrong down in Vale, pays the price. Now you've got to watch in the exit of Club, that white and blue line, there we sit, coming down into Vale. This is the young Japanese driver who was doing a very good job, had been fastest in the first sector on this lap, subsequently eclipsed by Jenson Button. Just runs too deep, too wide in Vale, trying not to spin the car by just running a little bit deep and getting on the grass. Shows you how tricky the situation is. But basically, if you're seeing cars lap by lap making improvements, right now Button is the fastest man on the track as we watch. This is Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen currently, well, he hasn't even done a full lap yet. This is his first flying lap. Finn should be familiar with the slippery conditions up in Finland. You get about 9 months of ice and snow, and Michael Schumacher takes the opportunity just to observe what his competitors are doing.
Yes, I'm sure he's watching to see how much traction control cuts in and how the cars are reacting through that entry to the complex section. Jenson Button has indeed gone fastest now. He seemed to be on a quick lap, that's confirmed with the times. It puts him ahead of Irvine, Sato and De La Rosa.
And an interesting statistic, Button's time 35.433 is exactly 15 seconds slower than a pole time in the dry. Now that will improve as the track improves. As we ride on board with Räikkönen, we expect to see cars getting down to the low 30s probably within the next 15-20 minutes.
Coulthard heading up through into the Abbey section now. We saw Räikkönen on the other side of the circuit. Let's just watch Coulthard through Bridge Corner, now into the left-hander at Priory. Coming up past the BRDC building on the right-hand side into the left-hander at Brooklands. And now into the right-hander at Luffield. This long, long right-hander seems to go on forever, but again he keeps it a little bit off the apex there, waiting for the grip and then hard on the power through Woodcote Corner and past the grandstands that line the start-finish straight before coming back into Copse. This corner, of course, now with this tarmac runoff area, John, that's been added in for this year.
Yes, a couple of parts of the circuit have had the new high-grip tarmac replacing the gravel traps. One of those places is on the exit of Copse, the other on the exit of Club Corner. That's the corner that we watched Sato and others. The off-camber corner, the corner that is very easy to run out of road before you get to the end of the corner.
Kimi Räikkönen has been setting a quick pace over the first 2 sectors of the lap. Look at the understeer, look how the front wheels are turning, but the car going straight on. If that was not a classic example of understeer, John, then nothing is. Let's see if it still could be a quick lap despite that as he comes through across the line. And yes, he goes faster than Jenson Button by just 0.02 of a second.
And Räikkönen, like pretty much everybody we're seeing so far, using the long way around Luffield as we go now to Rubens Barrichello. That patch of water you can see now pronounced on the right hand side of the circuit, nobody using that. Coming into Luffield, watch whether Barrichello takes the more traditional line. No, stays out. He's more centre of the road than others. Gentle on the throttle, not loading the car up, getting that pronounced understeer, but there, catching standing water. The back end of the car flicks around and just shows you how easy it is to get caught out.
Yes, that's right. Not even really in a corner as such, just the curve there. And Barrichello just adapts to the conditions. It's pretty slippery out there at the moment.
It's really, I mean, Rubens it's almost tippy-toe stuff from the Brazilian. Very, very gentle through Maggots into Beckett to get standing water just off the line that most drivers have been using. And then this is the exit up through Chapel on the left-hand side, Chapel curve now. Down hanger straight, full throttle, up to about 185 miles an hour in these conditions. Slower onto the straight, obviously because of the lack of grip.
Now let's watch him into Stowe corner. Comes in wide. Remember, this was the corner that's back in 1999. Michael Schumacher broke his leg going off on the first lap of the race, diving down the inside of Irvine and suffering a rear brake failure. Just in the pits now with Olivier Panis, the BAR Honda. The car that saw many modifications for the Canadian Grand Prix, and they've gradually been working on that since. They had both cars make it to the finish last time out at the Nürburgring. We can actually see some of the aerodynamic revisions on the Williams this weekend, which is good news. Sometimes it's very hard to pick them out, but they are running that little midships wing there, just behind the airbox, behind the driver's head, and above slightly, you'll see that extra panel, the extra little wing, which we've seen Jordan running throughout this season at a variety of different tracks, and now Williams also have something similar. Montoya heading on around the track at the moment with his teammate Ralf Schumacher just ahead, and Montoya with plenty of experience of Silverstone, of course, from his experience of racing in UK Championships, the Formula Vauxhall Series and Formula 3, of course, before working his way through Formula 3000 and then heading over to the United States before returning to Grand Prix racing courtesy of the Williams team.
And Montoya certainly was monstering the Williams. As we go back to Ralf Schumacher now as he comes through Copse, but certainly monstering the car. This is now back to Montoya. Williams drivers running nose to tail, coming through Prairie into Brooklands and then through Luffield. Much smoother through here. Of course, the aerodynamic downforce contributing a great deal to the levels of grip the car will have through the faster parts of the circuit, but the lower parts, the downforce falls off and shed loads as the speed goes down, and then you're reliant on purely the tyre grip and the mechanical grip that you have available to you.
So we're just under halfway through this first session of free practice. It is not raining, but the track is still pretty wet and still throwing up a lot of spray from the cars as they head on around. 10 cars on track at the moment, and fastest so far is British driver Jenson Button in the Renault. Kimi Raikkonen second, David Coulthard is third fastest, Irvine fourth, Fisichella fifth, and Takuma Sato is sixth fastest. We're watching the Williams here of Juan Pablo Montoya as he just tries to put in a quicker lap or two, and just looking at the pace he's setting at the moment, I shouldn't think it's going well, but I shouldn't think this will be enough to be going fastest.
Well, there we see there on the screen quite a long way away. Interestingly, the two Williams drivers through that first sector within hundreds of seconds of one another, and you can pretty much see that on screen as we look at Jenson Button, the young Englishman, hoping to get a podium, his first podium in his year's Grand Prix career, but that's under threat right now because Kimi Raikkonen currently second quickest, but going fastest of all in that first sector. And this is inevitable. Both teams, Renault and McLaren, on that Michelin wet tyre, but a range of wet tyres, as with Bridgestone, for the teams and drivers to select.
Well, Button waits while they change tyres on the car and then heading back out. Irvine looks to be on intermediates as he's getting ready to come back on track himself. On board with Kimi Raikkonen, and somebody smoking. That's one of the one of the Williams in big trouble, and we'll try and identify which one that is.
It's Montoya.
Montoya, right.
That's Montoya, and that is coming on to hanger straight. And there you can look, the unemotional and impassive look on the faces of Berger and Mario Tyson, the engine man from BMW, and that is a bitter blow to the BMW team, who suffered a number of blow-ups, caused them points both in Monaco and in Canada, and he should just pull. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, driving down the racetrack, a wet track with an engine that you can see there's, well, that's steam and probably an element of oil. Doing that on the racing line is, I mean, he will be brought in, if not by the race director. I will personally go and drag him off the racetrack. Outrageous.
I just watched on the pits channel actually Berger and Tyson having a conversation. I'm pretty sure that Tyson's going to say, "Oi, can we get him to stop?" I'm not sure. He's making his way down to the back of the pit garage, and they didn't look too impressed.
What he's done, he's pulled off on what is the historic Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone. They use a slightly different entry into Vale, but that engine blew up coming up through Beckett's in through Chapel Corner, and he ran all the way down Hanger Straight. And I mean, outrageous on the racing line, and I think that he will be brought in by race director and given at worst a substantial fine.
Right. Montoya's session is over, so Michael Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya are both out of this first session of free practice, and of course with an engine failure, which is something pretty unusual. Berger and Tyson there when they saw the pictures.
Yeah, you could see Berger's hands separating, indicating it's either a Conrod piston or valve in that engine failure, and little glimpses into the pit lane are one of the privileges you get with F1 Digital Plus. You won't see it anywhere else.
Absolutely. Well, there must be great disappointment for them, and of course it does cause them problems for the rest of the day. But Montoya will just have to hope they can come up with some sort of solution. Barrichello out on track at the moment. A little bit and we've got one of the Jags off, and that's De La Rosa down at Stowe Corner. Yeah, so De La Rosa's taken a little wild trip. Irvine's on track going through Beckett's at the moment safely. But they're both running reasonably quickly. De La Rosa's dropped down to 10th. He was on an improving lap up to that point. So a little bit of the team radio as he explains, no doubt, where he's been, what's been going on. Hopefully no damage done to all those expensive new aerodynamic pieces on the front of the car. All that hard work and development that's been going on in the wind tunnel, and then it gets taken across the gravel trap for a little ride.
Well, he goes, I mean, the entry into Stowe, he's so far off to the left-hand side of the track, just too quick, couldn't slow the car down before he had to start the turn, trying to take the extremely long way around Stowe Corner, getting it all wrong, then comes back on track and brings gravel with him.
We can hear straight away from Gerhard Berger, who's with Peter Windsor.
Gerhard, Ben Edwards and John Watson have just been trying to interpret your body language as to what actually was being said or what took place there with that problem with Juan Pablo.
I told just to Mario, my colleague, that we have a puncture, and he saw it.
Now, we're a bit surprised, or John Watson was certainly, that Juan Pablo stayed on line and left a lot of fluid out the back of the car there. Did he know what was going on in the cockpit?
I'm sure if you have that kind of problem, you know what's going on. I think he just tried to come back to the pits, but I think it's just better to stop the car and leave it where it is.
And do you have any information yet from the telemetry as to what might have taken place?
We saw that the problem is coming, but we don't know yet what is the reason for.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, Gerhard Berger, no doubt a bit concerned about that. We're just seeing De La Rosa being brought back into the pits now. So a bit of experimentation with tyres going on there, John.
Yeah, I mean, a great opportunity with a track that is beginning to show a drying line to use the slightly shallower wet rather than the deep water wet. Again, information gathering, but just to go back to Gerhard Berger, I mean, clearly, when we saw that view of Gerhard and Mario Tyson and Gerhard's hands separating, I mean, it is an engine problem. He can't say it, but we can. Something mechanical in that engine has broken. That's the bottom line. That's why Juan Pablo Montoya is stopped out of the track down at Club Corner.
Now let's take a look what's been going on here with Mark Webber, taking a somewhat wider line than planned perhaps, although managed to get through the first part of Abbey okay. A little bit of correction required, but nicely sorted out and continued on. Not too many dramas. Webber, of course, having tested the Jaguar last week in Barcelona, but now back in his more usual Minardi.
Ralf Schumacher, the remaining Williams BMW on track, and of course the team anxious to learn as much about the car and the aerodynamics on the racetrack, having not yet run that until this track opened, and Giancarlo Fisichella makes it all wrong down at Club Corner as well.
Well, everybody's exploring other parts of the track here today, and that's fairly common in these sort of conditions, and the track changing constantly as well. Be on edge, it says on the rear wing of the Jordans this weekend, and I think it's quite likely.
Interestingly, Ben, it was during that Silverstone test in early June prior to the Grand Prix, the track was wet for a substantial part of that test, and pretty much everybody in Formula One was testing at that time. You'd think they'd have learned where the track is going to be grippy, where it is little grip, and Giancarlo choosing, rather than spinning, maybe losing the engine, trying to get round Vale, just drives across the grass and rejoins the corner, mid-exit of Club Corner.
So Rubens Barrichello, the only Ferrari representative still in this, but he's gone fastest now, 1:33.531. So the Brazilian is at the top of the timesheets. Jenson Button here, back on track, he's second fastest now. Coulthard third. The track is drying out a little bit, as we heard from De La Rosa on that pit radio, so we're likely to see constant improvements in time. Still a fair bit of spray being thrown up though, particularly as they come into the complex here.
Yes, and Eddie Irvine, who was the first driver we saw to go out on the intermediate Michelin, he did a couple of runs. His lap 1:35.6 was the best. He's gone back into the pit, so clearly Eddie not yet. Oh, and Jenson catches that curb. Now you've got to watch those curbs. Painted curbs and rain are not a mix that are made in heaven, believe me. So you don't want to get onto them until you're confident that there's going to be extra grip to be gained from doing so. And right now, I think the best thing is to stay off him. Eddie's gone back into the pits, as I mentioned, in the Jaguar. He'll probably sit it out for another maybe 5-10 minutes, see how track. And again, Fisichella, same corner, a repeat, and there's no repeat in the screen. Look, no repeat. He did the same thing 2 laps consecutive.
Absolutely the same line going into Club Corner. So a great repeat there for Fisichella. He now makes his way back up towards Abbey Corner, and I wonder whether he might not come back into the pits this time. So let's take another look at the replay. This is a replay this time. So this is the second go at trying to turn in to Club Corner, the end of the Vale. Oh, and he got it to turn it a bit further this time.
Yeah, I mean, he came and he tried to do much the same as he did in the previous lap. Now, let me just say, Montoya's oil, which I was being very outspoken about, didn't actually get down as far or on that part of racetrack. When Montoya pulled off on the exit of Stowe, he stayed on the left-hand side and pulled into the little loop, which is the historic loop. So there is no oil at that part. That is just simply down to Fisichella, and in the case of De La Rosa, a couple of laps early, in Pedro's hands as well.
Well, the car parks are looking fairly busy this morning, despite the rather miserable weather conditions, and they've changed, of course, a lot of the access roads into Silverstone, and we certainly have been hearing good reports that it's been much easier to get into the track this morning, which is good news, and a lot of hard work, a lot of money has been spent as well in making it easier for the fans to be able to attend this weekend. And here's one of the drivers that the British fans will be cheering throughout the course of this weekend, I'm sure. David Coulthard, twice winner here at Silverstone. Last time was a couple of years ago, tried to make it a hat-trick last year, but in fact it was his McLaren teammate Hakkinen who came through to take the victory. And McLaren in recent years, John, really has been the team to beat at Silverstone, hasn't it?
Been a very strong team. It is a great team. I mean, there's no mistake about it. McLaren are a team that led by Ron Dennis, and again, just watching Takuma Sato up through Beckett. I mean, this is awesome stuff, watching the young Japanese through there.
Where's he going to go off?
Well, I mean, he's so quick, even in these conditions. You could see how much bite, how much grip that the Jordan was providing for the Japanese driver, and he's been pretty much quick all through the session. Right now he's further down than he is. He's 8th quickest, but personal best in the 29.7, and that's about half a second slower than Barrichello at that same part of track.
This is where Actually, I think it's at Abbey.
It is Abbey, in fact.
Yeah,
yes,
it's on
it
the
is.
turn into the left-hand. And yes, he is going to struggle because he has sunk down into the gravel trap. There's no nice bit of grass or extra bit of tarmac there for him to drive across.
It's an unusual part of the corner to see somebody going off. Normally, as Massa tries to talk to the team, but he's just gone in the back end and would have gotten away from him. Oh, well, Michael, all you want now is your fishing rod, my son, and you'll be happy as the proverbial fisherman.
Oh, what a great picture. Michael Schumacher just sitting out watching as this session continues. Remember, he spun at just on the exit of the corner that we've seen Massa go off, but it did look like a technical problem that pitched him off. So we have not learnt any more about that. Felipe Massa now climbing out of the Sauber. Now, if he were to walk the other way, go left, he might go and find Michael on the other side of the fence.
Well, Michael's a bit further down at bridge, but nevertheless, there we see, again, just I think his right rear caught the standing water on the exit of the corner. Of course, the gravel here at Silverstone is much different. It's a much smaller pebble. It's a stone-washed pebble of some description. Very, very difficult. You can see it's like walking on a shingle beach. Your feet just sink into it. That's what gravel traps are meant to be. They're meant to arrest a car. They're not meant to be there to allow drivers to drive in and out of them. And of course, that will be raked up overnight and re-aerated to avoid all the compression that you get when it's been raining and the gravel then sort of compacts down.
So let's just ride on board with David Coulthard for a moment. You can see it's very, very grey overhead. Prospect of more rain actually falling. The rain hasn't been falling for a while, but it's very slippery out there at the moment as again Coulthard gets it way out of shape, turning into the left-hander and now trying to build up the speed again as he comes out of Club Corner.
Yeah, Vale Corner really providing a lot of interest and excitement, probably a few hard murmurs for some of the drivers. It just seems that nobody wants to take the normal racing apex, that's get in tight, ride the curb, because clearly they know that the grip levels by using the part of the curb and part of the racetrack are sufficiently low that it is actually quicker to go the longer way around the corner, but there is more grip available to drivers on that line.
Riding on board with Barrichello here. Just a quick reminder, if you're new to the interactive service, the times that Fisichella was looking at from inside his garage, you can have access to on Sky button number 5. So if you want to have a look at the lap times that are being set at the moment, then go to Sky button 5. We're riding, as I say, though, with the man who's fastest so far in this free practice session. It is Rubens Barrichello, taking it fairly steady at the moment as he comes through Beckett's and now through Chapel Curve.
Well, Rubens is way off the throttle, all the way out of Copse, up through Maggots into Beckett's, and I'm just wondering, has he gone out on an intermediate or a different tyre to the full wet tyre that he may have started this session on? And it's just difficult to look down, so much water coming off. You can see there's one very broad groove, and I suspect this might be a Bridgestone intermediate rather than a Bridgestone full wet that Rubens would have been out on, and that's why he's a bit ginger with the throttle.
Well, yes, he's only taking things fairly easy at the moment. Coulthard was out on intermediates a moment ago. He's now come back into the pits as we're taking a ride here with Ralf Schumacher. Now, Ralf Schumacher currently a fair way down the order. He's 16th fastest overall, with his teammate Juan Pablo Montoya in 12th position. So neither of the Williams going that particularly quickly at this stage. Just taking a look at that onboard coverage with Ralph. You can see that little wing up behind the airbox and making his way around through Abbey. Massive accident over there, and continuing for just the final quarter of an hour or so of this session that's left to run. They've got another 1 hour session still, of course, as usual on a Friday, 2 1-hour sessions, and it is raining harder. I thought it might be. And there is the result. Ralph getting himself into a big slide as he comes into the left-hander at Brooklands.
Yes, and that was a bit of a wake-up call. I think he's lost the engine, in fact, as well. So Ralf Schumacher has had a pretty major slide, got it corrected. Well, I don't know what the problem was, but suddenly he's moving again, but you can see the rain falling even harder than it was at the start of this session. And there he is. Michael Schumacher decided, well, I'm going to have an umbrella as well. Now that's a scene not unfamiliar to many sports fans in the UK, but something that we're disappointed here this weekend at Silverstone. And just to remind fans of the Arrows Grand Prix team that they are not running at the present time, and that situation we hope will be rectified certainly before the Grand Prix itself, or before qualifying, and maybe sooner than that.
Eddie Irvine's had a spin, similar place to Ralf Schumacher, in fact just a little bit before that. Let's take a look at the replay here. He was turning into the left-hander at Brooklands, and the rain was falling. It was getting ever more slippery.
Yeah, and you could see the back end was already drifting out at the point he was heading for the apex of Brooklands corner, and then all of a sudden he sort of seemed to lose power. Now whether he was selecting gear, now somebody's clipped on the inside of Woodcut, somebody's clipped one of those corner markers, which is not what you'd expect them to do in the wet. You might think about doing it in the dry. That is lying right in the middle of the racetrack. It is off the line of the exit of the corner. There you can see one of those markers just to the right of your screen. Somebody's clipped that hard enough, and you have to hit those things pretty hard, believe me, because I've done it with proper road cars and they just bounce back up at you and say, try again, sunshine.
Well, the rain really is falling down hard now. You can see many of the fans are well prepared for it, as ever, but currently it is very, very wet on track, as we see a number of cars out there. Jarno Trulli looking to try and improve on his time so far, 11th fastest. Of course, it doesn't make too much difference at this stage. There you can just see how heavy the rain is falling. And his teammate, of course, Jenson Button, second fastest. A lot of talk about the drivers at Renault for next year. Will Jenson Button be there? Will Fernando Alonso be brought into the Renault team? And where does that leave Jenson for next season? Could he possibly go to Jaguar? Is there anywhere else that he might move to? Of course, Jordan, we don't know whether they're going to maintain, particularly Takuma Sato. Good opportunity this weekend, perhaps, for Sato to prove that he has earned his position. Felipe Massa makes his way back. He'll be staying at Sauber, I'm pretty sure, for next season. He's done a good job this year, particularly last time out at the Nürburgring, but he's fallen off this morning, so he has to make his own way back to the pit garage. As we watch the Italian Jarno Trulli still hard at work, trying to pick up information, learn where the dry bits are, if there are any, around Silverstone.
And just confirmation for those fans of Mika Salo and the Toyota that Mika is suffering from a bout of food poisoning, and well, I can't imagine what he would have been eating on a Thursday evening, because I'm sure Salo, like those other drivers in the paddock who have their own luxurious motorhomes, they stay on board those throughout the weekend and they tend to eat with the teams. So it must be something that was either within his motorhome or within the team that led to his food poisoning.
Well, that's a great shame for Mika Salo. His teammate Alan McNish, the British driver making his first appearance in the British Grand Prix, is currently down in 17th place.
Next one.
Just listening to a little bit of Jordan pit radio here.
Okay, thanks.
And McNish, as I mentioned, down at 17th. He's done some 15 laps so far in the Toyota, and they still obviously have a bit of work to do in terms of moving up the order. At the moment it is a Bridgestone tyred car that's fastest in these conditions, but a Michelin tyres car, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way down to Fisichella in seventh before we get another Bridgestone tyred car. And that's interesting in these conditions.
Well, I think it's more than interesting, it's actually very encouraging, but because really all this year we've seen Bridgestone have the dominant wet weather tyre and Michelin have been playing catch up. Right now Barrichello is fastest, and he's fastest by about 7/10 of a second from Jenson Button, but then behind that you've got 5 Michelin tired cars, Renault, McLaren, Jaguar, and that's something I'm sure Michelin will take some heart from.
Now Trulli's just done a 1 minute 40.3. Let's see what Fisichella does with the slightly wetter conditions, a 36.2. So compared to what Trulli has just done, that's a very rapid time from Giancarlo Fisichella.
Not only is it a rapid time, it's displaced De La Rosa from that 6th place, and it's sometimes an irony of when it's raining like this that the wet weather tyre actually works much better, and a brave Corner Morca there runs out and clears that away from the racetrack. I'm sure there's a yellow flag station waving at that part of track. So while the track was quiet, a lot of teams, drivers back in the pits. Nevertheless, good run from Fisichella, but it's strange when you get rain falling, you actually feel more bite from the tyre, as opposed to when it's maybe just a scummy or a slightly slick surface where the tyre just sort of chatters across the surface rather than actually bites into it.
Well, for the many British teams, British engineers, rain at Silverstone is not too unfamiliar. It's something they've had to get used to over the years of working in Formula 1 and in all the support categories. There is the site of the Arrows cars still sitting in their pit garage. We still hope to see them out, but we wait for news. Still no official confirmation of whether they will be running, but obviously they are hoping to, and Tom Walkinshaw working feverishly behind the scenes to try and sort out the problems, the financial difficulties, the payments to Cosworth that are owed in order to get these cars on track this weekend. And as we mentioned earlier, it's qualifying where they have to make their appearance. At the moment, it's fine for them to sit it out.
Yes, they don't have to turn up, or they have to turn up. They were scrutineered 8 o'clock this morning. They did get an exemption. They were allowed up until 10 o'clock this morning to be scrutineered, but that was carried out at 8 o'clock. But Alex Young, young Malaysian, driving in weather which probably he's not this unfamiliar with, because in Malaysia, when they have squalls, they have monsoons, and this now is not far short of a monsoon, and very quickly you will see water beginning to stand as Ralf Schumacher, well, another yawn, he's preparing to go back out on track with just over 6.5 minutes of this first Friday practice session remaining. But the amount of water now getting to the point where it's going to be very difficult to do anything meaningful, either for yourself, your tyre company, or your engine supplier. And I think that looking at Alex Young as he makes his way back, everybody's going to be diving into the pits, and it's only Villeneuve who currently is on track, and Alex Young with Ralf Schumacher preparing to go out.
Yes, and of course for a team like Minardi, John, that's pretty strapped for cash itself, the last thing they want is the driver to go out and stick it into the barrier in these conditions. Although quite often in these conditions you'll see plenty of spins, but hopefully not too many heavy impacts against the wall, because the speeds are that much reduced. But I think Alex Young probably will be heading in, unless he just uses it for more experience.
I think that Paul Stoddard will be saying, just bring the ship in safely, and that's what it's more like, a ship than a racing car. There's a lot of water in the space of the last 5 minutes has fallen, and a lot of the corners will have standing water, and in these conditions it's very difficult to tell what it is. Certainly we've seen it in Brooklands, we've seen it around on the entry into Vale and other parts of the track, so you've just got to be very prudent. Look, Jacques Villeneuve, I mean, if anybody's brave, it's Jacques Villeneuve, and he's simply just limping around at the slowest possible speed, and this volume of water falling is not what the race fans and the teams had looked forward to this weekend on a racetrack which is really the first half of this lap at Silverstone, one of the most exciting of any in the calendar. The second half of the lap much more technical, and something that the engineers battle with, the mix of downforce and mechanical setup, trying to seek the balance of top speed and maximising grip in low speeds. Let the aerodynamics do their bit on the high speeds, and there you can get a wonderful view of the front and the midsection of the BAR of Jacques Villeneuve.
Yes, that's right, and you can see the rain bouncing off the tarmac as well, can't you? Fantastic pictures here on F1 Digital Plus. Jacques Villeneuve making his way back in, and of course these are the sort of conditions in a race, John, that we would normally see the safety car come out, bunch the field up probably for a few laps, because of the amount of standing water that's developing.
Certainly if this weather was to be on Sunday, then you would have a safety car situation, and the safety car would stay out until such times as track conditions were safe enough to allow the safety car to return to the pit lane and for the race to get underway. It's one of those problems that affects Grand Prix throughout the world, but the UK has suffered from it in the past. Belgium, another notorious circuit where in Spa-Francorchamps in the Ardennes forest, rain falls at the drop of a hat, and in fact they've got independent safety cars that for different cars at different parts of the circuit. So let's have a look, and there's a very sad view right now.
Yeah, well, there's no cars on track, and that's quite understandable. Gives us a chance to run up and down pit lane a little bit, though. And Amy has caught up with Felipe Massa.
Felipe Massa, it looks like you were victim for the British Grand Prix wet conditions.
Yes, I tried intermediate tires and it started to rain again, so it was so slippery, and then I went out. So it's quite slippery the track.
Now, looking back testing last week, you endured quite a serious crash, and how are you now? How are your injuries?
I'm okay. I lost my brakes at the end of the straight, Barcelona, and then I crashed, the same like Monaco, but I'm okay, no problem.
How frustrating is it to lose so much time this morning?
Actually, we didn't lose a lot of time because it was already in the end of the session, and now it started to rain quite heavy, so I think we're gonna do everything this afternoon.
Better off staying dry. Thank you.
So Felipe Massa safely back at the Sauber pit and keeping dry, but somebody who's braving the elements is Ralf Schumacher. I'm amazed, John, that he's decided to go out in these conditions.
Well, I don't think Ralf has gone out voluntarily. I suspect he's been sent out primarily by BMW because they've had a mechanical failure on Montoya's car. They do not want to sit out the rest of this. Even if they get a chance to do this one lap at low speed, there may be something they want to check out on the telemetry about the engine that may be affecting Ralph's car as well. Now they're going to lose a lot of time because Montoya's car will have to be brought back in it between Stowe and Club Corner. If there's a fundamental problem, they can maybe get some of the answers from this brief and slow run from Ralf Schumacher, and believe me, it'll be a slow lap.
Yes, it will in these conditions. There's standing water all over the place, the risk of aquaplaning at a lot of corners on the track and a lot of the straights as well, and you can see how steadily he's taking it. But it was an interesting engine failure, wasn't it, because the engines are not under their maximum strain, you have to say, in these weather conditions, and yet they managed to lose an engine early on in this free practice. So it might mean, as you say, that for some reason there's something going wrong on the operating system in these conditions, and that's what they need to check out.
Well, of course, in these conditions you can get, if you have your traction control system, depending how it's set up, potentially you could get a wheel spin, a single wheel spin or two wheel spinning, and it would just send the revs soaring. So it may be a function of that. But I mean, here the speed that Ralph's running at there, you can see it's welcome to the River Silverstone. I mean, this is the newest river in Northamptonshire, or it could be in Buckinghamshire. We don't know which part of the track it is, because those two counties dissect this Grand Prix circuit.
Well, you could be out there fishing, John, I think, today at Silverstone track. Never mind the reservoir, it's absolutely pouring down.
I tell you, I bet there's a few old trout somewhere around there right now.
Well, Barrichello's hidden in the furthest back corner of the Ferrari pit garage as Michael Schumacher's come off his seat now, but is still standing out there waiting for the opportunity to help bring his Ferrari back in, and that will be in only a few seconds' time, because the session is counting down. The checkered flag will come out in a few moments, and he will then be able to mastermind the return of his valuable Ferrari back to the pit garage. If you're just looking at some of these shots and the amount of water that gets thrown off these wet tyres, these Formula 1 wet tyres, huge amount of water being able to be dissipated by these Michelin wets on the Williams.
And literally, Ralf Schumacher driving on tippy toes. You can see how high the car is. There's virtually no downforce on the car whatsoever. It's not being forced down on the track, and Jacques Villeneuve finds it all highly amusing. Something has caught his eye, and I can't imagine what Jacques would be looking at with Jock Clare, his engineer. That duo that seemed to somehow manage to get it all wrong on Friday and then have to recover bit by bit on Saturday to finally get somewhere on the back of the grid and wonder why it all went wrong.
Well, there we go. Checkered flag is indeed out on this session. No great shock to see hardly any cars out at the end of it because of the amount of rain that's been falling, and Ralf Schumacher, the last runner on track, deciding that they needed to do something just to gain a little more experience. So it's Barrichello who's ended up this first session as fastest overall, with Britain's Jenson Button and David Coulthard in second and third places. It's all fairly meaningless, it has to be said, with the weather as it has been. Kimi Raikkonen fourth, Irvine fifth, so they'll be able to be a bit more cheerful down there in the Jaguar pit. Fisichella sixth fastest, ahead of De La Rosa, Villeneuve, Sato and Nick Heidfeld, with Jarno Trulli then 11th, Montoya in 12th, Panis behind him as we look through those times. And we can see that the Michelin runners certainly having some decent times when the track was at its driest, perhaps on their intermediates, and that is promising because Bridgestone have in the past seemed to have the edge in the wet conditions, but as we know, Michelin have been doing an awful lot of work on that. Both Jaguars inside the top 10, so that gives them a bit of cause for good cheer. Villeneuve up there as well. Sato, one to watch this weekend, there's no doubt. He might have had his moments this season, but with his experience of the Silverstone circuit from his British Formula 3 days and from extensive testing here, he could well put in his best performance of the year so far. Further on down the list, we can see Montoya down in 12th and Mark Webber 15th, ahead of Ralf Schumacher. That's a bit of a surprise. McNish down 17th and Alex Young 18th. And then, of course, Mika Salo. He did go out for one lap despite the food poisoning, but he's feeling very poorly, so he didn't do any more laps. Michael Schumacher did not complete his lap because he went off. And there's his car being pushed back, and neither arrows were on track. Let's take a look back now over the highlights